Every single season, you load bags of mulch into a cart, haul them across your garden, tear them open, spread them out, and watch them slowly disappear. The weeds push through anyway. The soil dries out anyway. And by the time spring rolls around again, you are standing in the same aisle of the same garden center, buying the same bags all over again. You are not solving the problem. You are renting a temporary fix and paying for it with your money, your time, and your energy every single year without end. Here is what most gardeners never find out. There are plants you can scatter just once that will do everything mulch does and more. They suppress weeds. They hold moisture. They feed your soil biology. They attract the insects that protect your crops. And then they drop their own seeds so the whole cycle repeats itself next season without you lifting a single finger. 8 of them. That is exactly what this video covers. Before we go further, drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever deliberately grown a plant as a living mulch? Your answer might look very different by the time we reach number 8. Number 1. Sweet Alyssum. Starting at number 1, and this one might surprise you because most gardeners plant it purely for looks. Sweet Alyssum is that low, white-flowering plant you see hugging the edges of garden beds, delicate, honey-scented, and almost universally underestimated. What the vast majority of gardeners miss entirely is that this plant is doing serious structural work underneath all those tiny blooms. It forms a dense, horizontal mat that sits tight enough to the soil to block light from reaching any weed seeds trying to germinate below it. Weed seeds require light to trigger germination. Sweet Alyssum starves them of it continuously, passively, without a single intervention from you. But the soil function goes further. Sweet Alyssum is one of the most powerful attractant plants for hoverflies, specifically the adults, which feed on its nectar in large numbers. And it is the larvae of those hoverflies that do the real work, patrolling your beds and consuming aphids, thrips, and soft-bodied insects before they reach your crops. While the plant covers your soil, it is simultaneously running a pest control operation above it. When Sweet Alyssum dies back or gets trimmed, it decomposes remarkably fast. The stem-to-leaf ratio is almost entirely soft leaf tissue, nitrogen-rich material that breaks down within weeks and adds organic matter directly to the top layer of your soil, exactly where your earthworms and surface microbes need it most. And before that decomposition is even complete, the next generation of seedlings is already pushing through, because Sweet Alyssum self-seeds prolifically, adjusting its own density based on the space available. You scatter it once. It comes back every season without being asked. To use it well, broadcast the seed thickly along the front edges of your beds and anywhere bare soil is sitting exposed between established plants. The root system is shallow and fibrous. It will not compete with your vegetables or perennials for root space. Water it through germination, and then leave it entirely alone. In intense heat it may go briefly dormant, but it bounces back once temperatures drop. In tropical and subtropical climates, plant it through the cool, dry season for strongest performance. Scale it across a full bed, and you have a living, breathing mulch layer that also happens to smell like the garden is doing something right. Number 2. Creeping Thyme. Number 2 has been quietly used by experienced gardeners for decades, but almost nobody explains the mechanism correctly, and the mechanism is what makes this plant remarkable. Creeping Thyme is a woody perennial ground cover that stays low enough to walk across without sustaining damage. This plant is not just tolerant of foot traffic, it is built for it. It actually grows denser when walked on regularly. The mulching mechanism here is unlike anything else in your garden. Creeping Thyme produces volatile aromatic oils, thymol and carvacrol, continuously from its leaves, especially when warmed by sun or disturbed by contact. These compounds have documented allelopathic activity, meaning they chemically inhibit the germination of weed seeds in the surrounding soil. The plant is broadcasting a germination suppressant around the clock, every single day of the growing season. Straw and bark mulch work by blocking light. Creeping Thyme works by disrupting germination chemistry, And that suppression keeps going even during summer heat when physical mulches are breaking down and shifting out of place. The soil beneath a mature creeping thyme mat is measurably different from bare or straw-covered ground. The dense, woody base regulates soil temperature more effectively, keeping the surface cooler during heat and slightly warmer through cold nights. Moisture retention under an established mat compares to only 2 inches of wood chip mulch, produced while the plant is actively growing, not through decomposition. As older stems die back at the base, they form a gradually accumulating layer of organic matter that adds carbon to the soil slowly and consistently, not in a single bulk application you made months ago and then forgot about. Plant creeping thyme in full sun, non-negotiably. In shade, the mat thins out and the weed-suppressing density disappears entirely. Space plants around 12 inches apart, and within one strong growing season they will knit into a solid, self-sustaining carpet. Once established, it is drought-tolerant, evergreen in mild climates, and essentially maintenance-free. The most overlooked placement is in the paths between beds and between stepping stones. You solve the compacted bare path problem, and the allelopathic benefit extends outward toward your growing beds simultaneously. And because it is a culinary thyme relative, you can harvest it as a cooking herb while it is actively mulching your garden. 2 functions. 1 plant. 0 additional effort. Number 3. Nasturtium. Number 3 is one of the most underestimated plants in the food garden, and once you understand what it is doing both above and below the soil, you will never look at it the same way again. Nasturtium is known as an easy annual with cheerful orange and yellow flowers. What most gardeners never discover is that underneath those flowers is a plant with a complex set of chemical and physical properties that make it one of the most practical mulching choices, specifically for a productive growing space. Start with the physical structure. Nasturtium produces large, shield-shaped leaves, peltate in botanical terms, that position themselves horizontally, spread wide, and overlap in a layered canopy. This structure is exceptionally effective at intercepting rainfall before it hits bare soil. Instead of heavy rain compacting and eroding the surface, the nasturtium canopy catches the water and distributes it gently downward. The soil beneath a nasturtium patch stays structurally intact and better aerated than bare ground even after a significant downpour. Here is what very few gardeners know. Nasturtium roots release glucosinolate compounds, the same chemical family found in mustard plants, into the surrounding soil, and these have a documented suppressive effect on certain soil-borne pathogens, including specific strains of fungal disease. While nasturtium covers your soil physically, it is also modifying the soil chemistry in ways that protect the roots of neighboring plants. For pest management, it simultaneously functions as a trap crop. Aphids colonize nasturtiums in strong preference to your vegetables. You let the nasturtiums take the hit, remove the infested sections, and the rest of the plant keeps growing. The self-seeding behavior is almost aggressive in the best possible way. Nasturtiums produce large, wrinkled seeds that drop straight to the soil when the plant finishes flowering, overwinter in the ground, and germinate the following spring without any help from you. Sow direct only, they dislike root disturbance. Press each seed roughly an inch into the soil, water it in, and in warm conditions germination often happens within a week. The leaves, flowers, and seeds are all edible. You are growing a mulch that feeds you, protects your crops, and handles its own replacement season after season. Number 4. Calendula. Number 4 is a plant that reveals more the closer you look at it. Calendula, pot marigold, is grown in millions of gardens worldwide almost entirely for its flowers. The orange and yellow blooms look simple and cheerful. What those flowers are attached to is one of the most functionally versatile mulching plants available to a home gardener, and almost nobody uses it that way deliberately. The coverage starts earlier than most plants can manage. Calendula germinates at soil temperatures as low as 60 degrees F and keeps producing in conditions that cause summer annuals to stall. That means you can establish it in early spring before your beds fill with vegetables, in late summer between harvests, or in autumn to carry coverage through winter in mild climates. That seasonal flexibility is where Calendula separates itself. It fills the vulnerable gaps when most other living mulches are not yet growing, and bare soil is most exposed to rain compaction and nutrient loss. The root system is thick, fibrous, and deep enough to loosen compacted clay soils as it grows. When the plant is cut or dies back, those roots leave behind a branching network of channels that improve drainage and aeration below the surface. Meanwhile, the cut foliage above ground is a documented compost activator. Calendula flowers have been included in traditional compost preparations for generations because they accelerate microbial breakdown of organic material. Chopped and left on the soil surface, it breaks down faster than most green material and stimulates soil biology as it goes. Self-seeding is reliable and generous. Let a few plants set their distinctive curved seed heads at season's end, and the following spring brings a new crop without any effort from you. Once established in a garden, Calendula tends to stay permanently. Sow a 1/4 inch deep in spring or autumn, water in, and thin to 6 to 12 inches apart. The flowers are edible raw, medicinal when infused in oil, and useful dried for tea. One sowing, and you gain a plant that mulches your soil, feeds your pollinators, activates your compost, and produces a harvest all at once. Number 5. Buckwheat. Number 5 is where we enter serious soil-building territory, and the number that defines this plant is 6. 6 weeks from seed to full flowering ground cover. Nothing else on this list covers bare soil as fast as buckwheat. When a bed is sitting empty between crops in summer and weeds are beginning to establish, buckwheat closes that gap before most weed species have had time to take hold. Buckwheat is not a grass and not related to wheat despite the name. It is a broadleaf flowering annual with a specific and well-researched set of soil functions. The allelopathic effect is real and measurable. The roots and decomposing residue release compounds, primarily fagopirin and related derivatives, that suppress germination of many common weed species. Research has demonstrated significant reductions in weed emergence in soil where buckwheat has been grown and chopped down, even well after the plant itself is gone. The chemical suppression outlasts the plant and carries into the next crop cycle without any further input from you. When buckwheat is cut and left on the surface as chop-and-drop mulch, it breaks down efficiently. The carbon-to-nitrogen ratio sits at approximately 20:1, close enough to ideal that it decomposes without tying up nitrogen the way woody mulches do. Within 3 to 4 weeks in warm conditions, a thick mat becomes a dark, crumbly, earthworm-rich layer sitting directly over your soil. Below it, the soil is visibly richer from one buckwheat cycle to the next. Buckwheat roots also release oxalic acid, which solubilizes bound phosphorus in the soil and makes it available for the crop that follows, a genuine superpower for gardens where phosphorus deficiency persists despite repeated amendments. Sow thickly. Broadcast and rake in lightly. Thin coverage leaves gaps for weeds to fill. The dense clusters of small white flowers produced above ground are among the most consistently documented bee attractors in horticulture, so your beds will be alive with pollinators while the plant is doing its underground work. Cut before full seed set to control spread, or designate a permanent buckwheat area and allow it to self-seed freely. One 6-week cycle and your bed is reset, your soil is richer, and your weed pressure for the next planting is measurably lower. Number 6. Phacelia. Number 6, and this is a plant most gardeners have heard of but almost none have deliberately grown as a mulch, which is a genuine oversight. Phacelia might be the most well-rounded self-mulching annual that exists. The flowers are coiled, blue-purple spirals that unfurl like ferns, and the feathery foliage gives it a striking texture even before you understand what it is doing for your soil. The practical value starts with timing. Phacelia germinates in soil temperatures as low as 5 degrees C, which means you can establish it in late autumn, late winter, or early spring when virtually nothing else is growing and your soil is at its most exposed. Bare winter soil is vulnerable to compaction from rainfall, to nutrient leaching, and to structural damage that takes years to undo. Phacelia covers it precisely during those windows, when you need it most and have the fewest alternatives. The decomposition rate is one of the fastest of any green manure crop. The leaves are soft, low in cellulose, and high in nitrogen. In warm soil, they break down in under 3 weeks. Chop the plant, lay it on the surface, and within a month you will see no trace of it, but the soil beneath will have measurably higher organic matter and a spike in fungal activity that benefits whatever you grow there next. Phacelia is also one of the strongest documented bee plants in agricultural research, consistently ranked among the top plants for honeybee and bumblebee forage across studies from multiple countries. Here is the less-known advantage that makes Phacelia genuinely special in a rotation. It belongs to the borage family and shares no disease or pest vulnerability with brassicas, legumes, nightshades, or cucurbits. It is a true neutral. Use it as a gap filler between any crop group without any concern about disease carryover. The fibrous root mass left in the soil after cutting decomposes into drainage channels that mimic the effect of biological tillage without disturbing the surface. Scatter the seed thinly. A little goes a long way. A light rake-in and consistent moisture during establishment is all it needs, and after that it manages itself completely. Number 7. White clover. Number 7 is where we move from fast-cycling annuals into a true perennial living mulch, one that, once established, becomes a permanent feature of your garden's ecology. White clover is one of the most studied, most proven, and most underused plants in home garden mulching, and the depth of what it actually does goes well beyond the nitrogen story most people already know. The nitrogen fixation is real and significant. The roots form a symbiotic relationship with rhizobium bacteria that colonize the root nodules and fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into a plant-available form. Established clover can fix between 100 and 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year. In a home garden, a well-established clover path or border can supply a meaningful fraction of the nitrogen needs of adjacent plants with zero fertilizer input at all. But the mulching story is what most people miss entirely. White clover grows to between 4 and 8 inches tall, then stops vertical growth and puts all its energy into horizontal spread, runners called stolons that creep outward, root at nodes, and continuously thicken the mat. A mature stand is so dense that weed seeds landing on it have virtually no bare soil contact and no germination surface available to them. Moisture retention under white clover is comparable to 2 to 3 inches of straw mulch, achieved while the plant is actively growing, not decomposing. The microclimate beneath the canopy stays consistently cooler and more humid than bare or even straw-covered ground in identical conditions. The pairing most gardeners never try is white clover as an understory beneath tall crops. Plant it between corn rows, between tomato cages, or at the base of fruit trees. It fixes nitrogen that feeds the crop roots above it, covers the soil those crops leave bare, and draws pollinators into the most productive areas of your garden at the same time. Mow or trim it occasionally to trigger more lateral spread. The trimmings fall back as a light nitrogen mulch, and the plant regenerates from the base within days. The reason white clover is number 7 and not number 8 comes down to one distinction. You will understand it in about 60 seconds. Number 8. Comfrey. Number 8. Comfrey sits in a completely different category from everything else on this list. Not because it is well known, it is not in the way it deserves to be. Most gardeners think of it as a medicinal herb and nothing more. The gardeners who truly understand what comfrey does treat it as the single most valuable plant on their entire property. After this, you will understand why. Start with the root. Comfrey produces a taproot that drives 6 to 8 feet deep into the soil, sometimes further in loose ground. At that depth, it is mining minerals that are completely inaccessible to every other plant in your garden. Potassium, calcium, phosphorus, iron, silica, all drawn up from the subsoil and concentrated into the leaves. When those leaves are cut and laid on the surface, those minerals become immediately available to the shallow roots of your food crops. Comfrey is not just mulching your soil. It is fertilizing it with nutrients pulled from a depth no garden fork ever reaches. By dry weight, comfrey leaves contain higher potassium levels than farmyard manure, a comparison documented in permaculture research going back decades. Potassium drives fruit development, root system strength, and disease resistance in every crop you grow. A mature comfrey plant can be cut 4 to 6 times per growing season. Each cut produces a large volume of soft leaves that wilt fast and decompose on the soil surface within 1 to 2 weeks, no shredding, no composting required. The compound responsible for that speed is allantoin, a cell-proliferating agent present throughout comfrey tissue that directly stimulates microbial activity in the soil. Microbes multiply faster. Earthworms surface faster. The nutrient cycle turns over faster. Comfrey does not just feed your soil, it accelerates your soil's entire metabolism. The Bocking 14 variety, developed specifically for high leaf yield and minimal invasiveness, is the one to source. It produces the highest potash content of any cultivar tested and carries the strongest resistance to comfrey rust. Plant it once and it is essentially permanent. Even tiny root fragments left in the ground will regenerate, which is both its greatest strength and the reason you should choose its location carefully. Place it at the edges of your garden, around fruit trees, along the permanent boundaries of your beds. Give it a fixed home, and it will supply an almost inexhaustible volume of mulch material every single season for the rest of your gardening life. Start from root divisions rather than seed for the strawn. Just establishment. Once you have one plant, you propagate it from root cuttings indefinitely. You never need to buy it again. 8 seeds. One garden that feeds itself, covers its own soil, fixes its own nitrogen, suppresses its own weeds, and keeps producing without you hauling a single bag. What you have just seen is not a collection of separate tips. It is a layered system. Sweet Alyssum at the front edges, creeping thyme across the paths, Nasturtium filling the gaps between crops, Calendula bridging the seasons nothing else covers, Buckwheat resetting beds between harvests in 6 weeks flat, Phacelia sealing the soil through winter when everything else has quit, white clover building nitrogen along every border all season long, and comfrey standing permanently at the boundary of it all, mining the deep subsoil and returning what it finds directly to the surface where your plants can use it. The average gardener spends real money every year on mulch that is completely gone by the following spring. These 8 plants replace that cycle permanently, and while they are doing it, they are building the kind of soil structure that most gardens never achieve even after years of consistent effort. They attract the insects that protect your crops. They feed the worms that build your soil structure. They create a garden that does more of its own work with every season that passes. Start with 1. Add another the following season. Within 3 growing seasons, your garden will be managing a significant portion of its own maintenance, and the evidence will be in your soil color, your plant health, and your yields. Subscribe to this channel. This is exactly the kind of specific, research-backed, actionable information that gets posted here regularly. The gardener who knows this 3 seasons ahead of everyone else is the one whose garden looks like it runs itself. Because it does.